Talent development leader. For years, you have trusted ATD to develop your team. Now ATD is elevating its content, communities, and capabilities to develop you. Talent development leader is ATD's brand for your professional development, providing content that fosters and promotes your thought leadership, community that progresses with your career, and capabilities backed by ATD's capability model that keep you on the leading edge of the field. Welcome to ATD's Talent Development Leader podcast, featuring monthly conversations with the greatest influencers in the talent development field. We cover the latest trends, hot topics, and future-focused ideas that current and aspiring TD leaders need to know. Learn more by visiting www.td.org and searching for Talent Development Leader podcast. Ashley Walvoord is Associate Vice President of Talent Management for Verizon's global footprint. In this role, she is responsible for architecting strategies to deliver enterprise talent objectives. Ash leads global strategy and programs in talent transformation, performance management and development, assessments, talent intelligence, and digital HR for talent. She directs a think tank of industrial organizational psychologists and niche professionals to move mountains for the Fortune company. An IO psychologist herself, Ash is passionate about inclusion, culture, innovation, and leadership, and she resides in Louisiana with her husband and 3 children. Ash, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anne. It's great to be here.
Today, we're talking about performance management. I know many organizations are in the performance review conversation part of their performance management cycle right now. And I speak from experience. That's where I'm at. So I think this topic may be top of mind for many of our listeners today. We're going to start out by getting a little macro. Ash, when you think about the practice of performance management in the 2024 workplace, what do you think is most important to highlight for our audience of talent development leaders? What's new, what's trending, and where is the practice headed?
Absolutely. And well, 'tis the season, as you mentioned. There's a lot of exciting things happening in this space. Hopefully we can talk today a little bit about kind of the power of AI. We'll talk a little bit about data and how companies are getting more mature and sophisticated with analytics in the performance space. We also know that there is a global trend, fortunately, to focus on the holistic employee well-being, how they are functioning as a whole person at work, bringing them whole selves to work. I do want to say one of the fun things about performance management is its history. So the history lesson, for those unfamiliar, is for about the last 15 years. Corporate, public sector, small, medium, large businesses alike have really wrung their hands to try to figure out what is the best way to structure a performance management program. Mm-hmm. And there have been pendulum swinging shifts from removing formal processes like an annual rating to putting them back in again, or implementing technology to bring performance management into the flow of your normal day-to-day work. And a lot of learning there too, where maybe going too much into the flow of work is distracting. So you're talking to me at a time when we actually see some of the most variety with where companies have gone over to one side and come back to meet where they actually need to be. And I think that the industry overall is really looking at continuous improvement in this space. I'm not sure that anyone feels like they have landed their permanent final, never to be changed again model. So I'm proud of these companies for recognizing that they may still have room to raise the bar. But what a fun sort of trajectory.
I love that perspective. I've been working at ATD and so immersed in the talent development field for 16 years, since I was 12 years old. And I feel like we've been talking about performance management, all those years in some capacity. And it's been fun for me too to see this kind of pendulum swing, right? So see the trends come and go. And a move toward that informal, consistent feedback, that space. And certainly we'll talk about that in a little more depth in a little while. But first, I really like in our previous conversations we've had, Ash, about this topic, the label that you've given some of the more nuanced spaces of performance management. And I think this is what really I would love to hone in on for our audience today when we talk about this topic. And you called these areas gray and squishy, which I think is an excellent label. So let's talk about those gray and squishy areas now. And this is really beyond the what of performance management, and it gets into the how. How can listeners enable their managers to pull off performance management effectively and healthily? To build trust with direct reports, to have effective coaching conversations, to contribute to a culture of continuous learning, and so on and so forth. I'd love your insights on this.
I'm so happy that you picked up on that. And Verizon is spending a lot of time right now in our current era of performance management, really trying to focus on the how. So if we're displaying that, that is a win. Gray and squishy. You know what's easy in performance management? Slapping a program out there. You know what's easy is creating a new process and then training everyone on it. Those are actually easy things. Now, we're a global company of 100,000+ V-teamers. So easy is a relative term, but it's black and white. It's concrete. You can consider the box checked when you're all done with it. But if you look at the research in the space of feedback and perceptions and leadership and what it takes to actually develop or understand how to change course, I really believe that the gray and squishy is where more companies need to focus. Think about the culture of a team. When a leader is giving an employee some feedback about a deliverable or about their performance in another space, what is the trust on that team? What have been the deposits into the relationship bank? What is the other feedback that the employee has received? There's a lot of perspectives about, can you just only give feedback when it's constructive? Do you need to do a feedback sandwich of positive and then constructive and then positive again? There's lots of different styles, and I'm less concerned about that than I am the culture. And so you really start getting deep into this kind of squishy leadership place. And it's squishy because it's not one size fits all. We need leaders to leverage behaviors that can stem naturally from emotional intelligence, or just replicate behaviors that can be good practice from leadership research spaces. Trust is huge. We're also big on transparency. So the idea that you're not withholding a challenging conversation because it might not be popular with the employee, or perhaps it would be awkward to explain from a supportive company stance. Transparency as far as, are you aligned with your employee about what the actual expectation is for their role, for their goals this year? So trust, transparency, the feedback I mentioned. And then I also think that, the culture of a leader's team can go even broader. What has been the employee's experience from an inclusion and belonging standpoint? It's absolutely relevant to how they will self-assess their own performance. It's relevant to how they will hear their leader's words, or wherever the feedback is coming from. So when we talk about gray and squishy, these are the things where, you're really picturing that manager as coach to the employee, and they're bobbing and weaving. They're meeting the employee where they are at any particular moment. And the ways that you equip and empower a leader to be effective with that, but also set the tone organizationally for the employee to be ready to meet them there themselves. These are the things where, it isn't just a cookie cutter approach, and it feels super squishy. And we also think that it can be something that takes time to build. You're not necessarily going to start that at your company or place of work and expect results by year end. But how can we keep leveling up? How can we skill up? There's some really great things to explore there.
It makes me wonder too, if many of us have been focused on or majoring on the minors for too long, right? What's my process here? What's my structure here? My approach here? Informal versus formal, as we've talked about, rather than really digging into these areas that, as you said, take more time. They're harder, but I think you make them the greater impact, right? It's an interesting perspective.
Absolutely. I love that, majoring in the minors. It is, the decision about whether or not you're going to have annual ratings, quarterly ratings, annual feedback conversations, daily feedback conversations, all of these levers. It is good. It's been great for the world to see all the different ways you can kind of approach this so that we're not stuck in, the 1970s, sort of permanently with a one size fits all. Mm-hmm. But I also think that it's been so great for companies to take the world on their learning journey. There's countless examples of, we removed all formal processes. Mm-hmm. And guess what? We're putting some back. That is okay. It's not a point of we made a mistake. It's not a point of we should have never done this. And it also doesn't mean that going back to kind of historic practices is the only option. What you start to see is companies trying harder to meet their employees where they are and figuring out what is the right thing for their culture. Guess what? It's also what is the right thing for the type of work being performed. Not all jobs are measured on a daily basis or an hourly basis or in an objective metrics sense. And likewise, work that might feel more qualitative to review also benefits from some structure in performance management. So it's a really exciting space, but gray is where it's at, and being able to commit to and get top-down leadership, understanding and buy-in of that squishy place is really a great way to begin.
There's a lot of fluidity there too, right? Experimentation. I think giving themselves the permission to do just that, experiment, understand that jobs change, right? Employees change. If there's not a cookie cutter approach or one size fits all, then approaches to performance management also can and probably should change. And that it's going to look different forever.
That's right. And that can be a winning strategy in multiple scenarios, that different look. Mm-hmm.
So let's keep peeling back the layers here. I like this, kind of going from how to now exploring the why of performance management. And I think this helps people to really understand the whole point, right? Why are we doing this? How might TD leaders connect the purpose of performance management to a bigger picture career conversation with their teams and throughout their organizations?
I love the why. I'm gonna go kind of a parallel direction here with sort of two whys. You can't go wrong with really understanding that a big why for performance management is to support the business strategy. Whether you've got a departmental transformation, whether you've got an opportunity with company performance, if you are trying to solve for strategic workforce planning, or let's say that you might be on the cusp of something super targeted, like trying to balance a massive training investment. I mean, these are all different scenarios that ultimately are targeted at supporting the strategy of your business. What are you trying to accomplish? How can performance management bring its full value to help you compete in the marketplace, win with talent, et cetera. So that why, I think, is easily missed when we're hyper focused on things like how many points are on your rating scale, or are you doing quarterly check-ins? It should all work together, and it should all work together to really elevate what people can do to impact the business strategy. The other side of it, love the career flavor. Mm-hmm. So employees, due to kind of the sometimes bureaucracy, sometimes due to a focus on I don't know, tools or technology. Employees don't necessarily always understand how they can put performance management to work for their career. And that is a huge opportunity. It can be incredibly empowering. And we see this with our employees as well. Employee may be thinking about perhaps their next move and how can they, reflect on and champion their accomplishments to help land that next job. But your layers that you're peeling back go even farther than that. At Verizon, one of the things that we have recently done is a campaign called Journey Forward that helps us connect all the dots of the talent space for a V-teamer, both a manager or an employee. And it's kind of that idea that there's information in your feedback. There's information in your performance review. There's information and possibilities in your development plan, in your annual performance goals, learning opportunities. I mean, all of those sort of offerings in the talent management space, they're not programs for program's sake. The idea is, how can I help Anne create her red thread that threads through all of this in support of your career? And that we call Journey Forward. What is your journey? And how can we help it get you to that next stop along the way, or it might be your destination? And so when we think about learning, development, education, exposure, experiences, practice, upskilling, there is a real opportunity to connect the dots more tangibly for employees. And I think a lot of companies have this opportunity. And sometimes that can be through tying feedback to a particular opportunity, like great momentum. How can we capitalize on that? How can you capitalize on that momentum? Or it might be maybe you're solving for a gap. And how can you put these different resources to use to help close that gap? It's really exciting. So backing up, that parallel why, I think is the strength of performance management. It's not just the tools, just the tech, just an annual process.
I think that's an important culture consideration too, right? If you're flipping it a bit on its head, performance management isn't this for the employee, at least for their take. I'm not going to be, it's not about rating me or, a scary assessment time. How did I match up last year to my goals? But really, let's talk about going forward, right? My career, what are my goals for next month, for next year, and how might I meet those? And I love that shift for people to take on in their own orgs. Our listeners appreciate the practical, and understandably so, as they spend a great deal of time considering and even implementing performance management strategies in their organizations. So we started out a bit philosophical, talking about the hows and now the why, and I'd like to end our time in a more practical space. So in light of some of the trends you mentioned at the beginning of our chat, Ash, let's discuss some of the processes and structures we place around performance management. There's been a lot of buzz in the field about these different approaches and structures, and perhaps what should an organization be doing or should they not be doing. What are your thoughts on this? Are there any approaches that you've seen to be especially high impact? Any advice for listeners who are thinking through when you talk about the pendulum, where they might land today?
Absolutely. The pendulum is alive and well, and, customizing for your company and where you all are joining this conversation is really the key. And that should bring people a lot of relief. There's not a heralded single design for performance management that everyone knows. If you just do this, you are set. It reminds me of early infomercials of set it and forget it with the rotisserie chicken. That doesn't exist in performance management. Companies will still do it, but that's when they find, I don't know if this has been working for the past several years. So where do you start? Formal, informal. Understanding your baseline is a big key to success at the beginning of rethinking your performance management. What insight do you have into your employee culture as far as the experience with performance management? You may have data from engagement surveys. You may have data from your existing system. try to understand, what are your leaders good at in the performance management space? What are employees pretty good at? Is goal clarity a no-brainer for your company or your industry? Or is there an opportunity to start off with more aligned expectations? I mean, this is very elementary, but it has a lot to do with whether you go formal, informal, and what the structure of either of those options might be. Engagement data, there's many great providers out there who have normed questions around how an employee understands their expectations or their role clarity, or whether they get feedback from leaders. Hopefully, you have some insights, whether it's from a survey or from other inputs. That's huge here. If you have evidence that aligned expectations and the likelihood of feedback flowing may be a strength, or at least starting from a position of strength or solid practice, you will have a much more successful time experimenting with less formal, more cutting edge, or perhaps in the flow of work kinds of structures for performance management. If you are in the boat, as many companies are, of needing to strengthen your leaders' skills here, then you may want to keep parts of formal elements and mix them with something squishy. So maybe we'll grow in these basic capabilities, and then we'll also make a goal in our first phase to address something squishy and skill up our leaders in that area. Additionally, as you chart a course, think about how you can inspect what you expect. I don't love cliches, but that one really is to understand not just, are you getting adoption? Are you getting utilization? Are you getting compliance? Those can be very important details. But what's the quality of what is flowing through your performance management, whether it's literally in the system, content in the system, or whether it's a more naturalized human to human, kind of focus? How effective are the components that you have decided to start trying? Or how effective are the components that you've had in place for a while? This is key. You can usually improve in a couple of areas all at one time, but you can't improve and change everything and expect forward motion from all parties is sort of in the equation. You could get leaders to do certain behaviors, but will the employee be able to bring all of their whole selves to all of that improvement, or vice versa? So data, inspecting, and understanding, knowing your organization, these are some of those key things. And then that is where we get back to the pendulum. So you really can select from different areas of the pendulum. And I'd be remiss if I didn't just spend a moment on, we've mentioned a couple of times in this conversation, the idea of, annual processes, or, is there a rating, and what is the rating scale? But formal and informal processes can also have to do with kind of the explosion of dreaming that is happening with AI. The idea that, AI may have the opportunity in some, types of work to elevate the manager and the employees' decision-making, awareness, accuracy about really what is the level of performance that has been demonstrated. These are things that we really need to explore as an industry, and not simply hold back from a risk standpoint, but really understand what is this capable for. It could be very powerful. For example, a first-time manager, they may need a couple of years to get really seasoned at differentiating performance. This is a hypothetical situation. It's not a known that all managers need a few years. But what if there was elevated information that could help them skip past the laborious and manual assembling and aggregating of certain types of information, and instead spend their time really thinking about, was this truly adequate performance? Was it good enough? where was there a moment of excelling? Was it truly excelling? I mean, like really understanding how to evaluate and diagnose performance, technology that could help you spend your time there instead of kind of the more elemental tasks, I think is a very promising area of the field. Another example is in the area of feedback. The idea that, perhaps some managers are blessed with the gift of communication and voice and emotional intelligence and framing feedback, or that could also be something that correlates with tenure for managers. But what if we could level the playing field a bit by providing support for considerations for, all right, so here's the feedback. It's particularly constructive. You got a very strong employee. Here are a couple of things to be aware of. Perhaps, the way that this is being framed is not ultimately supporting this idea of inclusion, or perhaps we need to do a better job of being ready to engage the employee so that the feedback will motivate and inspire instead of dissatisfy solely and lead to sort of a dejected experience. I mean, these are examples also where we're seeing AI use cases being dreamed up. And I think it's really important for companies to understand how do they want to stay in touch with what the art of the possible might be. And then at the same time, of course, folks are reasonably hesitant to dive right in, particularly, performance. We're talking about a sensitive area with real accountability, and the outcomes matter. So taking that effort to decide how and when and where you want to play, you can be part of growing this field. You can be part of shaping and solving, even if you're not the AI developer. So what I would just strongly encourage in that space is the only way to fail is to entirely sit it out. that is the only risk. But otherwise, finding where and how you want to be part of where the world goes next, I think is not only exciting, but could really change things for employees and managers. So those are just a couple of fun, more current events, Anne.
It is exciting. The art of possibility. I love that, and the idea that this is about being part of the growth of the field, right? So how can we do that and embrace some of these new tools and tech? Certainly, given appropriate caution, as you've mentioned. But I think this is certainly an area where performance management has a lot of room for opportunity to grow and evolve. And it is an exciting time to be a TD leader right now, especially in this area. And speaking of those TD leaders, I would love to wrap up today talking about learning and development in particular and the role that it plays in kind of marrying with performance management and how you view that going forward. So how might L&D best move the needle and make the most impact when it comes to performance management?
Listen, learning and development is critical for the performance management space. It is a dynamic area for employees, for managers, and for a company, for departments, for heads of businesses. Learning and development is how we move from current capability, current performance, to perhaps for a strong performer, to elevating what they're capable of and helping them grow their momentum. What is the feedback? What are they aware of? Do they understand in their career where they might want to go? And it's okay if they don't, but understanding the role that skills could play for setting their performance on fire and helping them forge new ground. That all comes back to the development and how will we support that? It's the same if you're solving for a gap. Sometimes the answer is in expectations. Sometimes the answer is in ability. Sometimes that ability is something that we can support and grow. Sometimes it might be more stable, but then there's still the opportunity to find new ways to work. So both whether you've got a great performer, an average performer, a performer who is needing to up their game, we are huge believers in the power of development expectations, development opportunities, whether the development can be self-inspired or even when it does need to be strongly encouraged and come from an external source. These are the places where you actually can change the future, grow the future. That growth is not only better for the employee and their career, but it's an opportunity for the company to deliver, for the company to excel, for industries to find new places to play, and to accomplish what hasn't been accomplished before. So what I have found is that depending on your company's history, depending on the structure of your could be as simple as your HR department, how connected these different functions are in the talent space is something that varies widely between companies. And the good news is you don't have to restructure human resources in order to get some connectivity, but you do have to connect the dots for the employee. So I know I gave the Journey Forward example earlier about how can you help them understand how to connect things and red thread through different offerings and capabilities. But if we even just focus if we target L&D for a moment and just think about how is L&D delivering not only on the business needs, but also growing what is possible for the future. The way systems connect is huge, and it's a very exciting time in L&D, whether you're thinking about experience or organization and connectivity of information. It's also an exciting time as far as AI and matching, and how can you take the information that we know about an employee and serve up things that not only are they interested in, but may be the exact things that they need to be able to reach that next level of performance or that next level in their career. So systems, having a shared goal across different centers of excellence in talent, connectivity of data, and value proposition is really what Journey Forward is all about. So my question would be, think about those 4 pillars. And, again, most companies are at different levels of maturity on all of those. I mean, the HR tech is exploding at rates that, we see fantastic external partners, just growing new capabilities, moving into new spaces. I can promise you one thing, the industry will continue to evolve there. So plan to have a really agile perspective on how L&D can prioritize and hook in and frankly be a top enabler of performance management. Think about where your company is on those 4 pillars. You may not be at the most sophisticated place across all 4. Most companies aren't, but you can still put together a really fantastic strategy for growth year over year that will make employee development more organic, more self-inspired, more easily enabled, more efficient. I can guarantee you'll have a great time growing your strategy and growing your impact. And performance management fails without L&D. They are a necessary set of partners.
Thank you, Ash, so much for spending time with us today. I have appreciated your insights on not just the what's of performance management, but the hows and the whys, the gray and squishy areas. Again, I think these are ideas, questions that our audience probably doesn't have much time to consider because we're just going from one thing to the next, especially when it comes to implementing structures we already have in place for performance management. So to take a step back and have time to really consider some other possibilities. I think is critical. And so I appreciate, again, the experiences you've shared, what's going on at Verizon, and some ways that our listeners can, again, reimagine what's possible. Please tell listeners how they might connect with you to ask any of their own questions or to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. I love to collaborate. It's a really exciting time for people who touch talent, due in part to all of the advances in technology. But we also can learn from each other, and every company's growth trajectory is different. So please feel welcome to engage with me on LinkedIn. We also are active at a number of different conferences every year. That is a great time to catch up, design, dream together. I've seen it happen multiple times, so would love to hear from folks, and always happy to discuss and figure out what could be a next step for you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you for listening to this podcast by the Association for Talent Development. If you found this show insightful or useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.